Hello and welcome. You're watching News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. On the show, we're going to focus on an issue that's being very closely watched across the country. The Supreme Court of India is currently holding historic hearings in a very significant case, one that could decide the fate of millions of members of the LGBTQ community in the country. The question before the top court is this: should same-sex marriage be legalized in India? The government of India is vehemently opposed to the idea. It has argued that the construct of same-sex marriage undermines religious and social values in India, and the demand for it reflects urban elitist views. The government claims a valid marriage is only between a biological man and a biological woman. The BJP-led government has also argued that such a decision should only be made by the Indian Parliament and not by the courts. Significantly, and offering enormous hope to the petitioners, the five-judge Constitution bench headed by the Chief Justice of India, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, expressed disagreement with the centre's argument. The court stated that the government was making a value judgment, that there is no absolute concept of a man or an absolute concept of a woman, and that gender is far more complex than one's genitals. The bench also noted that it's not mandatory that the whole society should accept something for the court to recognize rights. Now, the argument of the petitioners is simply this: laws will change, society will evolve, and the courts need to rule when called upon by citizens who seek recognition of their fundamental rights to equality and equal treatment to lead a dignified life. They say we want to enjoy the full rights available to our heterosexual compatriots. We want to enjoy the unit of family. We want privacy and freedom to move freely. The government cannot treat us as lesser mortals and tell us to remain content just because homosexuality has been decriminalized. Now, this is the most important challenge to the gay rights status quo since 2018, when the Apex Court, in a landmark judgment, struck down a colonial-era law criminalizing homosexuality. The question that we're asking, therefore, is this: is India on the precipice of an epoch-making change? Will the world's largest democracy become truly inclusive, with equal constitutional rights for all citizens, regardless of their sexual orientation? Will the Supreme Court of India rise to the occasion and emerge as the torchbearer of democratic rights and a harbinger of hope for an entire community, as it has done on multiple occasions in the past? And isn't it time India truly emerged as a modern and progressive democracy of the 21st century? Let's put some of those questions to our panels. We have a terrific panel joining us on the show today, starting with Onir, renowned filmmaker and one of the most prominent voices on LGBTQ rights. We also have with us Jerry Johnson, an LGBTQ activist. We're also hoping to be joined in a moment by Sonal Giani, an LGBTQ activist as well. All right, we have all three of them. Welcome to the show. Onir, let me begin with you. Of course, the hearing is far from over. Day-to-day hearings, as we know, are taking place in the Supreme Court. Now, what certainly struck me are a couple of these observations that were made by the Supreme Court yesterday, where the court said to the centre that it was making a value judgment. The court said there is no absolute concept of a man or woman. It is far more complex than one's genitals. And the court then went on to say it's not mandatory that the whole society should accept something for the courts to recognize the rights of one section. The question I want to simply ask you is, how much hope does this offer you and the LGBTQ community? Do you believe the Supreme Court of India will rise to the occasion and legalize same-sex marriage?
I strongly believe and want to hope, and that's my hope, like a lot of us, that the Supreme Court will stand up for the democratic rights of such a huge, minorities, even if we are called minorities, actually we are a huge population who have been deprived of our constitutional right, of our rights as equal citizens of this country. And I feel that all the arguments that comes across, just are desperate move to stop us from achieving getting our equal rights, and most of them just don't make any sense, because nothing in society should be static. because we are as a society meant to change, be it in terms of religion, culture, everything to become better. Why should any law, any culture be something which takes away happiness from another person?
Absolutely. Now, Onir, the stand of the government of India doesn't really come as a surprise because it's been known widely for a long time now. However, how did you react when you first heard that the centre's lawyer argued in the Supreme Court yesterday that the construct of same-sex marriage not only undermines religious and social values in India, but in fact the demand for it reflects urban elitist views?
It was honestly very disappointing. Not surprising, but disappointing. Disappointing in various levels. When firstly it calls it an urban elitist, they don't understand the basic thing that sexuality or gender is not based on caste, class, religion, or race. It's there beyond that. It's what you're born as. And by doing this, they are kind of undermining and disrespecting the aspirations of millions of people who live in rural India, who are from the LGBTQI plus community and who have dreams, who have aspirations, who want to live a dignified life. And also, I think the very basic problem is we are living in a secular democratic country, and by the constitution, every minority should have full rights. So even as minorities, we deserve the right as any other citizen of the country to marry, to have property together, and all those things that come with marriage. The rights to marriage is not just about a ceremony, but about various other rights that is associated with marriage, and that is something that we have been deprived of. And that is, so it was disappointing because one thought that, after so many years, after the decriminalization of homosexuality by the Supreme Court, that the center would have made an effort to educate themselves. Our politicians would have made an effort to educate themselves that how wrong is this to deprive us of our basic rights.
All right, you are of course disappointed with the stand of the centre, but the ball is really in the court of the Supreme Court now. Another argument that the centre has made, though, Onir, is that any such decision ought to be taken by India's parliament and cannot be done by the judiciary. Now that is of course a legal argument, not so much a social argument. How do you respond to that?
I feel that, if Indian Parliament really cared about the, LGBTQI community, it would have on its own taken up this responsibility years ago. And every time, even before the 2018 judgment, every time it's been brought up in the Parliament, it's been immediately, it has been voted out. Shashi Tharoor has done that earlier, and our lives can't be eternally on hold because we have a parliament full of homophobic people. They need to educate themselves and become inclusive. How can, already a lifetime is gone, just waiting for being equal citizens. And so how long do you want us to keep waiting, because these people are just, incapable of recognizing our love, our lives, And, even in panel discussions, when I sit and hear the agreement, I look at them and I think that when I look at them, I don't want to take away any of their rights. I want them to lead happy lives. So why do they look at us and feel so insecure and want us not to find happiness and fulfillment of life? It comes from extremely narrow-minded way of thinking.
Well, there is no doubt that successive governments, whether Congress governments or BJP governments at the centre, have refused to take a progressive stand on this issue. I think you're quite right in pointing out that if Indian Parliament had to do it, they would have probably done it a long time ago. And it's their failure that has now led to this day where this case is before the Supreme Court of India. Now, let me ask you this. Of course, Mukul Rohtagi, who appeared for the petitioners, argued that we are not going to be treated as lesser mortals in this country. We want the same rights as our heterosexual compatriots. We want to be allowed to live with dignity. We want our freedom. We want our privacy. But, you know, two of the petitioners, Onir, Kavita Arora and Ankita Khanna, a couple who've been together for 11 years, have made the argument that it's not just social justice and equality that they seek, that same-sex marriage needs to be legalized in India for some very practical reasons, as they point out. As a couple, we need a joint bank account. We need to be able to give each other medical consent. We need to be legally recognized for inheritance. Now, are these not very significant and valid issues that usually impact the LGBTQ community?
Absolutely, and I feel that this is what we are trying to explain, that it's not just about a religious ceremony of marriage that we're talking about, but all these rights. I know of friends, gay couples, when one lost a partner, he didn't even have the right to take the body, because legally he's nobody. Today, if your partner is ill or needs any emergency treatment at a hospital, you cannot sign because you're legally not entitled to. And these are extremely cruel situations. And I feel that why don't these people who are opposing understand this? How is, today if I'm getting married, how does it affect the life of my neighbor? Is their marriage going to fall apart? Is the heterosexual, institute of marriage so fragile that the minute someone else is given the right, everything falls apart in that society?
Absolutely. Onir, before I move on to the other panelists, I need to get your reaction to a statement that was recently made by the NCPCR, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. I personally found this statement to be rather disturbing and preposterous. NCPCR, in its submission to the Supreme Court, said allowing adoption to same-sex couples is akin to endangering the children. Isn't this an extremely homophobic, ignorant and downright dangerous statement to make? And this is coming from NCPCR.
Homophobic and dangerous because, and also comes from not acknowledging the fact that, in India, unfortunately, child abuse is rampant. And that mostly happens in a very heterosexual, setup where boys and girls get abused. And that is a problem that needs to be addressed overall. And it has nothing to do with good parenting, has nothing to do with the sexuality of the parents. And, like all other human beings, there are people with flaws. There are queer couples who will be flawed, and there will be wonderful parents who can give love. And how can you want to deprive so many orphans who live in miserable conditions from finding home, from finding love, and it's also very insulting to think that every queer person is only interested in abuse. I mean, it is absolutely homophobic, absolutely unacceptable, and very, very cruel.
It's cruel because it is tantamount to practically labeling every gay person as being a pedophile. It's that dangerous. Onir, please stay on with us. I want to get the other guests into this conversation, but I will come right back to you in just a moment. Sonal, if I could come to you at this stage, I want to ask you the question that I asked Onir at the start of this show. How hopeful are you that the Supreme Court of India will rise to the occasion, as it has done on multiple occasions in the past, especially with regard to LGBTQ rights, whether it was striking down the law that criminalized homosexuality in 2018, or even recognizing the rights of transgender individuals back in 2014. And given some of the statements that have emerged from the 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court headed by the Chief Justice of India, how hopeful are you this time?
I'm really hopeful that, this time around we do get our rights and we get them sooner than later. It just seems like the logical progression to the decriminalization. I was also quite happy with the statements coming out from the Chief Justice of India. Some of the comments from the opposition seemed very misinformed and quite dangerous, especially, their understanding of the judgment on the rights of trans persons, their entire understanding of what it means to be a transgender. And forget about understanding what it means to be a transgender, even understanding their understanding of what it means to be a man and what marriage means to them. I think they were very dangerous positions which were openly taken in the court. Things like, being a man only reflects in the genitals of a person, and also that, marriage is not about love and care, it's really about procreation. I think that, there needs to be some self-reflection from within the positions that are coming. Because when you look at India, this is not the larger position of people. People are not in this for procreation, marriage for procreation. So I'm hopeful because it seems like, the judges were quite informed. Not only did they, correct misinformed statements, but from time to time, they did suggest, ways in which, and, the larger public, the larger social construct and how they see it. So it was interesting that they do want to keep it limited to the Special Marriages Act and not really go into the personal laws. I think it is a measure that is comfortable with the community as well. I feel that, at the moment it's very important to provide some sanctions at least, and then further on to look at what are the loopholes that come in, and then go head on with religion. And so I'm in support of it, and I really hope that, we get these rights. The whole world is watching this particular case and how it is being handled and the statements from our government. And I really hope that the community comes out winning in this.
You're quite right, Sonal. All of India is watching this case very closely, and the international community is looking at India very closely as this case is heard by the Supreme Court. As I said at the start of the show, isn't it time India, which is the largest democracy in the world, became truly inclusive and progressive as a society in the 21st century? Let me now go across to Jerry at this point. Jerry, of course, Sonal makes the valid argument that, the petitioners have said that we need you to redefine the Special Marriage Act. The court has also said we're not going into personal laws, but perhaps the word husband or wife needs to be replaced by spouse in the Special Marriage Act. That is the basic argument. How do you react, though, when the government of India says that a valid marriage is only between a biological man and a biological woman? Of course, you heard what the Supreme Court said in response to that, and that would be music to your ears. But then the lawyer representing the government shot back saying, but, if we go by this, several acts would become unworkable. He says, I may have the biological attributes of a man, but I consider myself a woman. Should the Code of Criminal Procedure treat me as a woman? These are some of the arguments that are being made by the center in court.
See, there are multiple things to react to that. My first reaction is actually to wonder, how did our government become so uprooted from Indian heritage and Indian roots? Because if you really trace back through our history, through our Indian history, Jainism actually talks about different kinds of biological sex, different psychological sex, different gender expressions, and different ways of presenting yourself to the world. So from Jainism, from Buddhism, from Hinduism, we have historical scriptures that identify the ways in which sex and gender manifest differently. And this is centuries and centuries before the West, in fact, discovered this. And when you started the program, you said that in 2018, we overturned the colonial era law. We keep forgetting that all of these ideas of man and woman, one man, one woman in a marriage, and heterosexuality, these are colonial era perspectives and mindsets. And now finally the West has discarded them, but our Indian government for some reason has decided to become more Western than the West, and are embracing these colonial era mindsets of what it means to be man, and what is gender, and what is sex, and what is attraction. And I think that's quite unfortunate because today, when we are hosting the globe in our country under the G20 presidency, we are looking to present to the world an Indian mindset, an Indian way of looking at the globe. And we need to bring the locus of attention back to our roots and to India. And in India, we have always thrived on diversity. Diversity has been the strongest foundation of our culture and ethos for 5,000 years. And when you look at the Constitution says everyone is equal. So if I'm not a criminal, because now we don't have the colonial era law, you're not a criminal as a heterosexual person. If we both are equal, then why do you have more rights than I do? It's a simple, basic question. It's a violation of the Constitution to say that both of us are non-criminals, both of us are equal citizens of India, but only one of us will have more rights in marriage, in hospitalization, in insurance, in property, but the other one does not get these rights. I mean, it just flies at the face of Constitution law. So there are multiple reactions here. I think it's unfortunate that our government has become more westernized in its mindset and thinking. I would not even say westernized, I would say colonialized. It's still colonial in its mindset and thinking. And I would also say it's unfortunate that in this present moment when the world is looking at us, we are not presenting a good example of upholding constitutional equality guaranteed to us.
Well, yes, it is. The entire argument is ultimately about equal constitutional rights for all citizens of this country, regardless of their sexual orientation. I think it all comes down to basically just that. And you're quite right that it is the British who introduced this law in the 19th century in India. When we were under a colonial rule, they discarded the law ages ago. It took us 70 years to even do away with the law that criminalized homosexuality. And here we are in 2023, still debating whether same-sex marriage should be legalized in India.
It's quite ridiculous, I mean, honestly, because if you think about it, we are supposed to present to the world as a mother of democracy. And what is nothing in democratic countries than equal treatment of all citizens and equal rights of all citizens? I mean, that's the basic.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you, Jerry. Let me take this back to Onir. Onir, a lot of different arguments against legalization of same-sex marriage have been made by the centre in the Supreme Court. One of which is that, this is just a minority we're talking about. A majority of Indians are not like this. They are not gay. Their sensibilities will be hurt if we were to recognize same-sex marriage. Our religious values and social mores will be compromised. Now, of course, Mukul Rohtgi, the lawyer for the petitioners, made a strong, simple and cogent argument saying majority is simply not the basis. It is my right. We are equal human beings entitled to rights guaranteed under the Constitution. It is as simple as that. Do you believe that's what it all boils down to? And that is really perhaps, the nub of the matter, the heart of the matter that the Supreme Court needs to really focus on?
I think that's the very essence of this entire fight, that one, under our Constitution, it's not about majority, what the majority values. It's about every single individual has the right to equal rights from the Constitution, which is guaranteed by the Constitution. So by denying us that, we are actually dishonoring the Constitution. So it is very simple, and I don't see why constantly we are being referred to what the majority thinks. Does not matter. We might be minority, which is actually not a very small minority. I keep, emphasizing that we are not a small minority. But even if we were one person, even if it's one person, under our Constitution, I should have the same rights as every other citizen of my country.
Absolutely. Let me go back to Sonal at this point. Sonal, of course, the government of India has been accused of emboldening homophobia by taking the stand that it has taken in the Supreme Court. The question really is, it is about laws, it is about social and legal justice, but you would agree, Sonal, that there is also a larger societal challenge that we still continue to face. I want to ask you, as a member of the LGBTQ community, as somebody who speaks out so strongly for the LGBTQ community, in your personal experience and assessment, what has changed for the community since 2018, when that law which treated your community as criminals was struck down by the Supreme Court of India. How far would you say we've actually come between then and now?
No, I think we've come a very, very long way since then. I mean, like, if you went back to, before the 2018, if you talk to somebody, who was like from the grassroots, a regular community member, their main challenges would be that, how do I even tell my friends? How do I tell somebody whom I like that I'm gay? Those were the primary challenges. There was no question of thinking about, being out at work or telling your family. From them to now, a regular queer person is definitely out to, most of their friends, right? They have been out in their colleges, they are entering into their workplaces as out persons. And now the main challenge is how to come out to my parents, because there is a lot of marriage pressure, right? And I think like this emboldening or this empowerment did come because in some sense, that particular judgment, gave a lot of media visibility to this issue. But having said that, I find that really it was the media channels who took it onto themselves to educate larger civil society. While, the judgment on Section 377 came out in 2018 and the court, instructed the center and state governments to conduct sensitizations with, different facets of society, it was not really implemented, I find, wholeheartedly, and which is why we find this lacunae. Instead of, including diverse people, people of diverse sexual orientations, gender identity, sexual characteristics, instead of including them in curriculums, we've actually had bans when NCERT, tried to make this part of their curriculums. And, if you try to do any work with the government which is outside of their comfort zone, it was something that, was in a way shadow banned, right? So from now to then, obviously, we are still struggling with society completely sort of trying to understand us. We do find that civil society right now is way ahead than governmental organizations. We find that, right now it is civil society, younger students who approach us to do, sessions in their educational institutions, especially government-run universities, So I think there's a long way that we've come from there. And this is my worry that when, when our Union of India representative says that this should be, handed over to the parliament to decide, I kind of worry. I worry about the implementation that will happen. It has not been as speedy as it should be. It has not been a priority for them. In the meanwhile, if you look in the last 18 years, from 2018, suicides have continued, mental health issues have continued, marriage pressure has continued, And one finds that our issues are not really being taken as seriously as they should, even when they are matters of life and death,
I have to agree with you, and like I said to Onir earlier, fact of the matter is, no matter which political party has been in power at the center, this is a debate that's been going on in this country for decades, but no political party, no government has really shown the political will to bite the bullet, as it were, and come out and say that, we really need to bring in these reforms, social and legal reforms. We need to do right by this one community, which does comprise millions of Indians. Let me take this to...
If I mean,
yes.
Like I just want to say, when it comes to political parties, they have never taken stand when they are in power. It becomes a very
It's so much easier when you're in the opposition, right?
Yeah.
To become a champion.
Yeah, so then you become a champion, but we need you to do it in power. Even now, when we try to make a case in front of the government, the opposition is like, yeah, you people are Congress supporters. But the point is, I'm not asking the question to the opposition. This is my government. You are my representatives. You better look into it. Don't start calling me, and asking me to seek opinion from the opposition or start doing, whataboutery. They need to be a government. Why they do the job of the government and listen to the citizens and make sure policies are supported.
Absolutely. And today, even if the Congress party does claim that it has a progressive stand on the issue, of course, it needs to answer questions about why it didn't do anything to further, the rights of the LGBTQ community when it was in power for years and decades in this country. So let me take this to Jerry now. Jerry, the Supreme Court, like I mentioned earlier, has delivered a couple of very, very significant landmark judgments impacting the LGBTQ community, their rights, their lives. Whether it was recognizing transgender individuals as the third gender, or in 2018 decriminalizing homosexuality. I want to ask you, from your personal experience and assessment, What has changed between then and now? How much awareness have we managed to create around issues concerning rights of the LGBTQ community? Is it now easier for people to come out of the closet? Is there greater acceptability? Or does social stigma continue to present an enormous challenge?
See, I mean, the social stigma continues to remain, and that's not going away anytime soon. But you know, the big difference that happened from these judgments that happened in 2018 and the Nalsa judgment and even the Puttaswamy judgment, various judgments, what they did was imbibed a renewed hope of dignity and renewed hope of optimism in the future for the gay and LGBTQ community, right? And that was a very foundational aspect of these judgments, that suddenly you don't feel you're a criminal in your own country for having done nothing other than just the fact that you love someone different. You love someone that the world does not think is quote unquote normal. I mean, that is the only difference here, right? When you think about marriage and what we're asking for as equal marriage rights, what we're saying is we want to give a social and legal sanction to a relationship that we choose. We want to marry this person. We love this person. And can you imagine how many marriages in heterosexual communities are completely out of force, completely outside of the consent of the individuals involved, completely for reasons that have nothing to do with the two people involved, maybe family, maybe money, maybe property, maybe anything else except the two individuals. And here is a community that says, we want to get into relationships that are legally sanctioned out of our consent, our choice, our love, our attraction, our desire. And can you imagine the kind of children that will come into these beautiful setups? The children that will be raised by loving individuals rather than individuals that are forced to live together because of parents and community and caste and religion and whatnot. So there are so many ways in which law imbibes dignity. It brings in respect into relationships. See, just because if the government or if the courts do not pass the equal marriage rights, does not mean that there will not be queer people in unhappy marriages. They will just be in unhappy heterosexual marriages. There are many, many queer individuals who are in unhappy heterosexual marriages, living lives of lies and living lives of dishonesty, not because of their own selves, but because society has compelled them to live in dishonest lifestyles. Can you imagine how much suffering is in that household? The children raised in those these dishonest households that are suffering, households that are devoid of love. So each of these laws and each of these rights are not only just legal progressions in society, but they're also psychological progressions. They are telling us as a society to live more honest, open, authentic lives. And I think that's a very important part which people don't focus on. That when you are able to live honestly, authentically, you create better societies, you create better families, you ultimately create a better country.
Well, that is an excellent point that you make, Jerry, and I want to take this to Onir. Onir, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you or anybody has to justify why we need same-sex marriage legalized in this country. But for argument's sake, do you agree with Jerry and Sonal, who say that, you know, in India, there's still so much pressure from parents, family, societies with regard to marriage. And as long as same-sex marriage is not recognized, you are going to have a situation where people are scared of coming out to their families, or as Jerry put it, so many people are forced into unhappy heterosexual marriages as a result of this.
First of all, I would just quickly like to say that I think if Jerry and Sonal were there in the court would melt and understand. They're so wonderful that they
I'd say all three of you perhaps should have been in court making these arguments that you're making on our show, because these are such fabulous and cogent arguments. Go ahead.
You know, over the last few days, actually, even though it's happened before, I've had so many women call me up, you know, because telling me that, you know, why don't you make a film about men who are gay and in heterosexual marriages, and how it is in the entire situation of this having to live a dishonest life. And I realized, you know, I knew about it, but, you know, from all these women, we're seeing it from a point of view of empathy towards the husbands who could not counter society at that point, you know, who have lived their life, perhaps got married when as individuals we were criminalized by law. And that is what has happened. I mean, that is how laws can, make change happen in the way society looks at us. And it has done so. And I feel that just like Sonal mentioned, that, just by change, by decriminalizing, it has just made us, be able to empower ourselves more than anything. We can speak up for ourselves. We can decide to not stay invisible. For the longest time, we have been staying invisible because of fear. Many of us did that. And today I feel more and more people are coming out, as Jerry beautifully put, to lead honest life and to be true, and that is how you create a beautiful country, because you are looking at happy people, not people who are not only destroying their own lives but destroying lives of other people because they are living in forced heterosexual marriages.
Well, you're quite right that this fear factor that we're talking about, I mean, it really does make such a huge difference to an individual's life. But before I go back to the other panelists, Onir, let me ask you this. There are two equally important dimensions to this entire issue. One is, of course, the legal aspect, the fight for justice, the fight for legal rights, which are extremely important, and then there is the social dimension to this. In your view, legalization of same-sex marriage, to what extent is that likely to help address and reduce the social stigma that still exists in such a huge way in this country? Do you believe that is going to happen once you actually have legal rights being conferred on the LGBTQ community?
Absolutely. I feel it starts with simple thing like business. You can imagine the number of weddings that will start happening with designer costumes, food, the entire industry coming into space. I feel that the more people start seeing people celebrate their love, celebrate their togetherness, it also demystifies this whole concept, and and these are the first steps towards acceptance. And I feel that by legalizing it, because there are people, I mean, today we can see that there are a lot of people, even in India, getting married, some even doing it with the Hindu rituals. I've seen those videos. It's not still recognized by law, but these people are celebrated and loved by their families. There are same-sex couples. I know, I have friends who have raised children together, out of who don't live in India, but they're doing it. So if people are capable of doing it in other countries, why should we consider ourselves any lesser human beings? And I feel that, yes, any children who are brought up in an atmosphere of love will only become beautiful children and good citizens of this country. And legalizing is the first step towards social acceptance. I feel it is very, very important to have this, because it just opens out the social space for us. And the more people see us in this open, the more our relationships, our lives become demystified.
Well, the lives become more demystified, and legalizing same-sex marriage, Onir says, would be the first important step towards social acceptance. That is a very important point. Sonal, do you agree with that? Onir says that so many members of the LGBTQ community are forced to stay invisible, or worse, live dishonest lives. Do you believe legal rights of the kind we are discussing and debating today will lead to greater social acceptance and will help address the homophobia that is still rampant in this country?
I definitely think that will make a huge difference. I think that it's important to also remember here that gender plays a huge role. I think that marriage pressure is, on women far more than men. I mean, of course, it's on men, but, the options of being able to get out of a marriage that you don't agree to, a forced marriage, is far more difficult for women, and that's something one must sort of consider. Beyond, of course, when you change the social fabric to be more accepting and creating families that are built out of love, obviously, the society around you will change in more positive ways. This community will be able to contribute to the economy Right now, most of us feel the need to, leave the country. There's a huge brain drain happening, and the company and our country is losing GDP in millions because of the exit of LGBTQ citizens. So it even makes it is a good decision to allow marriage rights, even in the economic sense.
All right. Jerry, let me ask you the same question. Legal rights and social acceptance. Do you also believe that the two are very closely intertwined? And once the former is addressed, it takes care of the latter to a large extent?
Absolutely. See, the thing is, the legal is not only the legal. As I said earlier, it carries with it a lot of psychological weight. It carries psychological sanction. It gives you social dignity and social sanction. So whether or not the social stigma will get erased tomorrow if equal marriage rights are passed today, or it will take another 5 years, the point is that the country systemically and politically and legally is telling you that you are all equal citizens and you are all equal and worthy of dignity. And that is a very important message that goes across to families, it goes across to institutions, it goes across to corporations, it goes across society. And I think in gradual process, society will catch up. And the thing is, fundamental rights cannot wait for majorities to catch up. Like, for example, we won't wait for everybody to be comfortable with black people and anti-slavery in order to have anti-slavery laws. We pass anti-slavery laws and then we expect society to catch up immediately, right? Likewise with caste system, likewise with child marriage, or likewise with child abuse, or any of those social ills that we have. We first pass laws to clearly state the direction that we want society to go, and then we hope society marches there promptly. And that is exactly what we need to do with equal marriage rights as well. We point the direction where we need to go. We need to go towards a society of equal rights for all, equal marriage rights for all, and then we will allow society to gradually catch up to the law, to the system, and to the politics of it. But we cannot turn it the other way around. Fundamental rights cannot be put to the submission of majority vote. It doesn't work that way.
I agree with you, and you're actually right. Social acceptance or not, legal rights have their own place and need to be protected for every individual who is a citizen of this country, because we are all equal in the eyes of the law. Onir, I will give you the last word. We often say, love is love. It's as simple as that. Do you believe the Supreme Court of India can be convinced to see it as exactly that? Love is love. Do not discriminate on any grounds, and certainly not on grounds of sexuality or sexual orientation. How optimistic are you, as we wrap up this discussion, and I'll ask you, how optimistic are you that India may well be on the precipice of an epoch-making change?
We will win, and I think we will start the process and inspire many other countries where we are still criminalized by law to follow suit, because we will set an example and we will win. This has been already too long delayed, and there is no way, there is no going back. We will win this.
So heartening to see you smiling and hearing you say we will win. And hopefully we will, because it doesn't matter whether you belong to the LGBT community or whether you belong to the so-called majority community of heterosexuals. At the end of the day, every right-minded Indian will stand up for equal rights for the LGBTQ community, because this is about rights, this is about justice, and this is really about constitution. And let's not forget, love is love. On that note, Onir, Jerry Johnson, Sonal Jiani, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation with all three of you. Well, before we end the show, let's play out for you an excerpt from a documentary that we did at NEWS9 Plus about this very issue that deeply impacts the LGBTQ community in India. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching.
When I finally came, standing straight when I called your name, and I called to your heart just as loud as a train. 'Cause whenever you're lonely, well, I feel the same, and I've loved you forever.
Hello, am I audible?
Hi, I'm Chaitanya Sharma.
I am Abhishek Ray.
God made the rain. Yes,
We met on Facebook during the lockdown of 2020.
When my soul
I fell in love with his smile and mustache.
Like anybody else, we all grow up with the notion of spending our lives with someone, you know.
I really want to have this proper wedding, and why not?
fallen angel, so ashamed.
One thing is the reality is like we are not legally married. As of now, we are socially married. If you're decriminalizing a same-sex relationship, I think there's no point of stopping for same-sex marriage.
It is an institution, and the marriage is always between men and women. It can't be between two men or two women.
Since the Supreme Court had decriminalized homosexuality, which means that this society can accept sex, but it cannot accept love.
You think that marriage will solve everything. It will not.
I think a lot of the discomfort and phobia comes from the fact that people haven't seen same-sex relationships.
We still are denying people their rights based on who they love and who they are.
Across the globe, the journey between decriminalizing same-sex relationships and according them the recognition of marriage has taken its own sweet time. The United Kingdom took over 40 years. The United States took 12. France took over 200 years. And even in Taiwan, it was only in 2019 that same-sex marriages were recognized.